All right. Welcome to episode number 29 of the Jake Blanchard podcast. As always, we're brought to you by our friends at Fellowship Brand Premium Men's Grooming Products. Go to fellowshipbrand.com, enter JBP at checkout, get yourself some free shipping on your first order. I'm extremely excited today. My guest is Congressman Russ Fulcher. He's a fourth generation Idahoan. He grew up on a dairy farm in Meridian, Idaho, graduated from Meridian High School, earned a bachelor's and a master's degree from Boise State. He spent 24 years in the technology sector, mostly with Micron in Preco Electronics. He sold Idaho products in over 60 countries around the world in every state in America. He shifted his focus into politics. He spent 10 years on the Idaho Senate, 6 as the majority caucus chair, and now he's serving in the House of Representatives since January of 2019. Congressman Fulcher currently serves as the Republican Deputy Leader of Natural Resources Subcommittee on Water, Power, Oceans, is a member of the Natural Resources Subcommittee on Federal Lands, Education and Labor Subcommittees on Higher Education and Workforce Development, and a member of Education and Labor Subcommittees on Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions. Very, very busy man. Excited that he's going to spend some time with me today. Congressman Fulcher, thanks for being on the podcast.
You know, it's a real privilege, Jake. Thanks for doing what you do. Your interviewee list must have been a short one because compared to a lot of the people you talk to, I'm not very interesting, but we're going to do our best here.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. You know, I typically haven't had anyone in the political sphere. I think it's such a polarizing time that we're in. And I was actually shying away from requesting guests in the political sector. And then I decided, why do I care about what people think? You are a wealth of knowledge and somebody who represents the state that I live in, and you're actually my representative. And I am so excited to have an opportunity to speak with you today.
Well, it's a privilege for me to be able to communicate a little bit about what we do or attempt to do and the times that we're doing them in. And I think that that's one of the things that's the most pertinent for this, Jake. I just got back from a congressional trip where myself and about 30 other members just met, and we purposely got off the Hill and we just congregated with one another to discuss some of the things you and I are probably going to talk about right now, because we are in a very trying time. Things are extremely polarized. We had a number of just outside guests join us to talk with us. One of them was Newt Gingrich, and you probably know who he is. He's a former Speaker of the House and has been very politically involved, ran for president. But one of the things he said just a couple of days ago that was a kind of a wake-up call even to me was he was looking at us, the current members of Congress, saying, I don't know how you guys do it. He said when he served, I believe, 1978 to 1998, he said, you know what? The environment was so different. We actually had some fun. And although there was debate and there was partisanship, it wasn't just a dogfight every time we faced off. I mean, it was there was some congeniality. We would go to dinner in the evenings together, you know, all that kind of stuff. We don't do that anymore, Jake. I mean, we're in an extremely polarized environment. A lot of things are done remotely, and you can't build rapport with people when you can't, you know, shake their hand and be with them personally. And so you are correct when you point out that this is a trying time, and I think it's a unique one for Congress, and America sees that conflict.
Absolutely. So maybe we can get anchored in on like why did you want to be in politics in the first place? Like what are you attracted to by this profession? Or this service?
Probably started back in high school. I used to think I could play basketball, and that was going to be my pathway to college. I was going to try to get a scholarship, and I had a knee injury. A freak accident took place. I got hit, had a knee injury, and was playing high school ball, and some family friends that happened to be members of they were veterans. And the American Legion hosted a program at that point called the Boy State program, Boy State and Girl State. And it was a mock government setup. And so being laid up not being able to do what I wanted to do, was play basketball, I went ahead and I did that, and it kind of generated an interest. Also made a connection. I was sent to Boys Nation as well, elected by my peers to do that. Went to Washington, D.C. for the first time. I met with current Senator Jim McClure, who was Idaho's senator then. He actually took a liking to me, invited me back. I did an internship. So that kind of planted the seed. Years later, as an early Micron employee, I was kind of injected back into the system again because there was technology trade wars with Japan, and so I got planted in Jim McClure's office for a while to work on that issue, and so I could see the power of government even in commerce and has it impacted business, and so that further generated the interest. And then once again, years later, when I was kind of winding down my tech career, if you will, 20 plus years, I was appointed as a state senator by Governor Kemp Thorne at the time, and that kind of changed the direction of my life. And so I embraced the government path as a career path after that. But it wasn't until plenty of years as a farm kid and plenty of years in the real world. I will say that probably what helped prepare me the best for this was 20 plus years traveling around the world and seeing other countries, other systems, other commerce programs, other education systems, how they work, how they live. That was very helpful in hindsight. But that's in a nutshell how I got where I am. I did run for governor in 2014, was a runner-up in that. It was close, and I thought the whole thing was over at that point, and I was fine with it being over, but then a vacancy opened in Congress, and we were pretty sure that if we ran, we'd win. And so that was the Cliff Note version of the pathway here.
Okay. And then, so, continuing in the same train of thought, your current role as a congressman is representing, it's District 1, right? In the Idaho House
Correct.
of Representatives. Maybe just take a second for listeners, because we spend so much time talking about politicians and what they're doing and what they're not doing. What does the House do? And I know that's elementary, but as adults, I think we kind of forget sometimes. And would you take us through that? And then what's a day in the life look like for you?
Well, first of all, what the House does and what it should do are two, in my opinion, are two vastly different things. So actually, I think it's an extremely pertinent question. But as you are aware, there's the three branches of government. There's the executive, there's the judicial and the legislative, and the House and the Senate make up Congress, and that is the legislative component. What we're supposed to do is to make the laws. What we're supposed to do is to make those laws in conjunction with the constitutional guidelines, which is supposed to be our framework. And I think that's where we oftentimes lose track and we lose our way, and a lot of the conflict begins. But Jake, if you just take it down to its raw denominator, really all we should be doing is statutory guidelines that surround commerce and military. That's really, there's more to it, of course, but those are the main provisional guidelines that the Constitution says. People, individuals, states, local government really should have a bigger role than they do right now, but the federal level has become all dominant, it seems like, and so we're involved with everything. But constitutionally, there's two primary fields that we should have responsibility for making law, and then that is that is in the area of security, our safety, and commerce, how we trade, across borders and amongst ourselves. So that is what this should be. Now, what what do we do is for one interest, special interest or another, Congress has become involved with pretty much everything. Everything you do in your everyday life is touched by what we do or what we have some degree of impact over. A lot of it, of course, is how your money, or in this case, your grandkids' money, is being spent. We allocate those dollars, and we are in significant debt right now. That's why I mentioned your grandkids, is because we're spending their money right now. So the short answer is we do too much. We are too involved. But it's also pertinent to point out is our focus is to make statutory law to live by. And so that's what we attempt to do and probably aren't doing a great job of right now.
Sure. And then you're also a part of various committees or subcommittees, et cetera, within Congress. I imagine that those are functionally they're bipartisan, right? There's representation from both sides. But to your comment earlier, from maybe a civility standpoint, it's hard to get things done. So, like, maybe your perspective on what's it like to be a part of those committees if it's even hard to talk to folks across the aisle.
Yeah, answer that this way. Here, about a year, a little over, well, probably a year and a half ago now, I was in my first term of Congress, and I requested a meeting with two people at the same time. Don Young, who is the longest serving member of Congress from your home state of Alaska.
Yep.
He went into office in 1972, so he was actually present during the Nixon resignation. And a gentleman by the name of Bob Latta. Bob is from Ohio. He is kind of the self-described historian for Congress. He literally grew up there. His father held the seat in Ohio from 1959, 1989, I believe, and then Bob's had it since. So he literally grew up there. And sensing a lot of conflict, I asked them, I said, so is it just me as being a first-term member of Congress, or is there more conflict than normal? And Don, I thought, provided a really good answer. And he said, Russ, we believe there's more conflict in the U.S. Congress now than any time since the Civil War. And he says, I'll give you a couple reasons why. Says, first of all, Speaker Pelosi is governing differently than any other speaker ever has before. Typically, it's been the chairman of the various committees. You mentioned the ones I'm on, resources and education. There's also transportation, health and welfare, intelligence committee, armed services, the list goes on. But it's typically the chairman that set that agenda. But he says now the speaker has come in and she says, I want to be the single determinant of what the agendas are for all those committees. Now, why those chairmen allow her to do that, I don't know, because collectively they could run over, but they don't. And so it's changed the face of Congress. Basically, the entire agenda right now goes through one person. That's different. It's never been that way before. The second reason is, and he reached into his pocket and he held up this, and he says it's instantaneous news. And this is true, Jake. We can't have a hearing, a committee meeting, any kind of a congressional event without there being a report of some sort, either a tweet or a post or a written article or a video broadcast that communicates what just happened with an editorialized spin. And that just changes the whole dynamic. By the time I step out of the room, I have not just the responsibility of communicating and acting on what just took place, but oftentimes trying to correct a version of what took place because of someone's editorialized commentary. That changes everything. It changes a lot. The third thing that Don pointed out, I thought was equally interesting. He said, airplanes. He said, Russ, people fly home on the weekends now. We never used to do that. We used to stay, for the most part, during the session, we stayed in Washington, D.C. We went to dinner with each other in the evenings or on the weekends. We would play in the Congressional Softball League. We actually got to know one another. And that know one another is probably the most important factor that I think is missing right now. I am in my third year of Congress, and with the new members that have come in, I think it's fair to say I have not even personally said hello or met with, other than maybe through a Zoom call, my Democrat colleagues. It's almost impossible for me to get a meeting with some of them. I have reached out to some for the entire time, multiple times, just to try to get a meeting. And because of the polarization, because of the COVID and the distancing and how things are being done remotely now, we don't know one another. And I think those things have contributed to a polarizing environment that has been very difficult to overcome. And I think that is what has contributed in large part to the stalemates that we continually run into.
Wow. Well, that's such an interesting perspective. And I guess the flying back and forth thing I would have never thought of as maybe a contributing factor here of just the bonds that people make by naturally working together, regardless if they're in the trenches on opposite sides. But we're all human, right? And I think that maybe that's what we need to remember a little bit around.
That's right. And I got an apartment for a reason. Cost of living there is very expensive, but I got an apartment on Capitol Hill for a reason. And initially I was staying on the weekends with the hopes of using that time to build relationships. And this is pre-COVID. And I quickly realized I was the only one there. With the exception of one of the members from Guam or sometimes Hawaii, because their commute is so long that they literally would have to turn right around and come back by the time the next congressional day popped up. But that's it. And so no one was there. So I found myself falling into that same habit of coming home pretty much on the weekends because that's good too, because you get to stay in touch with your district, but you lack that communication with your colleagues, and you need that. I need that. We've come up with some interesting things. We have what we call potato diplomacy, where we'll take for every member, we rotate through. We start with our committee colleagues, and then to colleagues across the aisle, and then to the rest of our conference. We'll take a gift bag. We'll put an Idaho Spud candy bar and a bag of Idaho potato chips, and then I'll write a personal note to Congressman so-and-so. I said, it's an honor to serve with you. And then a few days later, we'll request a meeting. And, creative things like that sounds goofy, but, it's a way to try to break the ice. That's had some success, but still, especially now with COVID, it's very difficult to get time with one another.
I'm fascinated by a quote I heard a while ago, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's "We elect culture." What are your thoughts or your initial thoughts pondering it through? Because I think, what you're describing right now, I can relate to from just an individual perspective. So one of the reasons I started this podcast is just to have open-minded conversations with folks, because I felt myself becoming really closed off to various ideas or perspectives, specifically with maybe what someone's background might be. And if they're not the expert of the experts, then I don't want to have the conversation. Oh, you don't know anything. I know stuff too. And there's a lot of pride and ego going around right now. And what are your thoughts on the phrase "we elect culture"?
I believe that's indirectly true. And how that happens is the people regionally pick their representative. That's the beauty of a republic. And as you might imagine, my mindset, the lens of which I look at the world and make decisions is significantly different than my colleagues in New York City. We have a totally different view of the world, and we're also a product of our backgrounds. I'm a farm kid from Idaho, but I spent 20 plus years bouncing around the planet. And so those things leave an impression on you, and it helps form your value system, your faith. If you have a faith base is a significant part of that too. But yes, I believe that's true. And so we take those impressions, we take that life experience, and we impose that through our decision-making process into our legal system, and hence the culture. And so I think you could also extend that by saying Congress is a reflection of society that way. So even though Congress is deeply divided right now, I think you can also say our people are deeply divided right now. We are a reflection of those people, and the culture is a reflection of that. There are certain words that you can say that just simply explode. And because of the different backgrounds and the different lenses that we look through, that has a impact on the very culture of our society, and probably is one of the underlying reasons why we've got to figure out how to get back to some degree of civility. Because, I'll take a high profile example, AOC. She's very well known, and she's from New York, but for the most part, she's never been out of the boroughs of New York. And so that's the lens that she looks at the world through. She will measure distance in terms of subway stops. I measure distance in terms of air hours, right? And so she has spent very little, if any, time outside the country. I've spent a lot of that. Agriculture background versus a high density urban background. And frankly, there are things that she knows and understands about that I have no idea, and vice versa. But how we interrelate, how we communicate, how we share those ideas, and the importance in the processes by how we make decisions is extremely important to communicate. And right now, we're not doing that very well.
And I think it's if I might, an experienced simpleton here, it's the way in which the conversations are conducted, right? The reminder that you're always on parade when you're a politician, and that you are, reflecting, your words have weight. Every single word of everything that you say, people hold on to. And to your point earlier, maybe try to twist it around, or maybe try to promote their own agendas through it. So I think there's a carefulness. And certainly, in my personal opinion, the last president that we had was not overly careful with his words, though I do, have some appreciation for his tenure as well. So it's a very conflicting kind of issue. I mean, if you're inside, you're just like, man, I really wish he wouldn't say things like that. But also it's like, I kind of get why he feels that way. So I don't know, maybe your perspective on that.
Well, I think you're very insightful, and look at it this way. So Washington, D.C. Has been nicknamed the swamp, the deep state. Why is that? And what is it about President Trump that put everything at such a conflictual stage? I have a theory, but it's an educated theory because I've been living it now directly for a number of years. Washington, D.C. evolved over the course of time, and the bureaucracies that support the various agencies have grown, and these agencies and these cabinet positions have taken a life of their own. And now, if you're a federal agency, you're a living, breathing organism, and so you further that growth by adding more people and adding more responsibility. And so there's a natural tendency for that to grow and get bigger and bigger, especially as our country gets bigger and our economy gets bigger. At the same time, you have an intelligence community, NSA, CIA, FBI, Secret Service, that has been charged with protecting our people, protecting those agencies, and given the authority after 9/11 to do so with very, very little oversight. Now, enter a personality as President of the United States like Donald Trump. He comes in with his background, his sphere of influence, his life experience, and he sees bureaucracies running amok. He sees these agencies that are too big, with little accountability. He sees an intelligence community that operates basically on its own with no accountability or very little. And so what does he do? He does what a CEO does. He starts firing people. He starts rearranging the deck, rearranging these organizations. And so the entire bureaucracy, the entire intelligence community revolt, because now their way of life is threatened. And the conflict, it just becomes unimaginable. And so that's why every single day for about a 3-year period was underscored by impeachment efforts and charges on all kinds of collusion or anything, is because the system was fighting back, and he was fighting that system. And frankly, I think part of that is needed. I think all of us have to have accountability. And through my lens, Jake, I look at it and the intelligence community does not have a lot of accountability. They're supposed to have Congress's oversight, but yet the process has evolved such that we really don't have that much oversight over the intelligence community. The bureaucracies are not supposed to make law. They're supposed to enforce it. They're not enforce, but they're supposed to administer it. But they can take a law, and how you administer it or not administer it can change the rule and the force and effect of that law. And so you have all of these gray areas that has led to the overall environment that we're in. And I don't know if I'm doing a good job of responding to your question, but that, in my opinion, is kind of the baseline source of conflict between the Trump versus the establishment, if you want to use those terms. And it's not simple, and it's not going to get fixed anytime soon, but that's the basis.
Congressman, I deeply appreciate that perspective. And I think, I think that there's probably a lot of obviously truth to kind of what you're saying is anytime, and I've been in organizations where we have acquired new leadership in certain ways and understand what that does to just company culture, as opposed to, these large bureaucracies that have been set up and done a certain way and allowed to grow for years and years and years. And what an interesting time that we're in currently. I will say with that, how does a stimulus bill get over 5,000 pages? or how do bills in general get so big? Yeah. We're talking like, how is it possible to read all the things that are in it? How is it, I don't know. It just seems I've seen 5,000 sheets of paper. I know that it is a stack to the ceiling. Like, how does this work? Help me understand.
Well, because it's not just a stimulus bill. There's all kinds of other stuff in it. And that's a problem that I have with a lot of this. I guess somewhat famously, every year at the beginning of the Congress, I relaunch as bill number 1 from me is the single subject bill, which basically is just taking a page out of the Idaho state playbook. We have a rule, the Idaho state legislature, that if you're going to run a bill, it has to be wrapped around one primary subject. You can't put tax policy in the same bill as healthcare policy, as transportation, as all that stuff. That's not the case in Washington. So that 5,000 page document you referred to isn't just a stimulus bill. It has immigration policy in it. It has healthcare policy in it. It has transportation policy in it. And so every decision we make on that is not cut and dried. You have to weigh the good, the bad. And so those 5,000 pages in the current culture, congressional culture, we won't even see until maybe a few hours before we have to vote on it. It's a very bad system right now, and it's very unfair. And so that's how a lot of this stuff gets put into place. You'll hear correctly a newscaster or a commentator or a pundit say, "Hey, Congressman Fulcher just voted for this bill that it funds some obscure military in the Middle East," or whatever that might be. All these obscene things. Well, technically, that's probably true, because it got rolled into about a 500 or a 5,000 page bill, and it was really the SRS funding, which is critical for Idaho, or the PILT, the payment in lieu of taxes, that our counties need to simply function, was the primary reason that I would vote for that. But in order to get what I needed, there was all this other stuff in there. And so it's a very bad way to do governance. It's the way it's currently done. I'm attempting to change that, but I'm not naive. I need a lot more people that agree with that strategy. And frankly, Jake, the reason that it's there's even some positive basis for it. Take a state like Idaho. We're one of, I think it's 8 states where the majority, and I'm not sure if that 8 is correct, but it'll be close, where we have a predominant amount of federal land in our state. Alaska is another one, Nevada is one, mainly the West. And so in our case, it's nearly 2/3 of our land mass is federal. That's unique. In order to function and fulfill our constitutional requirements without the ability to do property tax, we can't finance government. We can't provide schools and all that without some degree of federal involvement, because we don't have what all other states have and the ability to tax property ownership, because we don't own the property. We're in the state, we're not landlords. So these omnibus bills, that's what they're called, these big bills, were kind of created in a way so that states like Idaho can get payment in lieu of taxes from the federal government, because the other, whatever it is, 40 plus states would never agree for Idaho and Alaska and Nevada and Oregon and whatever to go run a bill to say, okay, we want X amount of money because we can't tax. Well, they have no incentive whatsoever to allow that to happen. So there's even a positive reason for those big omnibus bills. That's how they got the way they are. But it's so out of control now. That 5,000-page document you talked about is not a stimulus bill. It's an omnibus everything bill. And so all of us are faced with the decision, here's the good, here's the bad. We have to make a choice, and it's either yes or no. And we have to do it in a few hours. So our staff will scramble, we'll get together, we'll break it up into pieces, we'll comb through it as quickly as we can, we'll use other staff resources to try to help us, and then we put together our opinion and our position, and then we run with it. That's how it works. It's not efficient, but that's how it works.
That's once again, great to hear that perspective and try to empathize and understand with some of the tough decisions that you're tasked with as a leader and as a representative of this state. Maybe I'm just kind of doing a time check here. I've got 2 other, main questions I wanted to ask. I think, the first one is an Idaho related question. And so this is maybe a polarizing topic in the state of Idaho as well, but I hope you would entertain answering it for me. There's a lot of talk about federal legalization of marijuana. And then there's also specifically talks of it being such an opportunity from a hemp and cannabis standpoint in the state of Idaho because of the types of farmlands and some of the things that we mentioned earlier. But we are, in the state, probably one of the most restrictive when it comes to policies around specifically cannabis and its medical use and also its recreational use. Your perspective on that, and if it's something that Idahoans will ever see in the future, or maybe why they shouldn't.
Well, we have the benefit now of being able to see what happens in states that engage there. We didn't have that up until a few years ago, but we have neighbors in Washington, Oregon, not too far away neighbors of Colorado, California now that have legalized a lot of this, Oregon to an extreme extent. And so we have the benefit of information that we've never really had before, and we can see some of those impacts. And so on the one hand, you hear, well, this is going to be a great revenue stream. We can regulate it. We can keep it safe. On the other hand, you've got the social and criminal fallout of that. There's probably not a week that goes by, Jake, that I'm not approached in some fashion, either by an educator or a law enforcement official or a mayor or a county commissioner, basically pleading, do not go down this road in Idaho in terms of the legalization. And for me, it's the hallucinogenic part. There are products that come off of plants that are useful in many, many ways. And I have not figured out why we wouldn't do that for some of the hemp products and things like that, where we've seen the breakdown and the cost, the social cost, has been the legalization of the hallucinogenic part. And whether it's been safety on the roads, whether it's been the criminal impact, whether it's been the educational or workforce diminishment as a function of people that are using that's one thing. About a month ago, we had a group of legislators from Colorado approach myself and others to try to take a run federally at undoing what they did at the state level, which, the states need to make their own decisions on these things. And I'm not a huge fan of the federal control, but I can tell you where I'm personally at. I personally have come to the point where I think legalizing the hallucinogenic component has a much higher cost through either the safety, the criminal impact, the safety impact, the education impact, and the workforce productivity impact than any tax benefit that you might get in the short term. And I think that's playing out relatively clearly in our neighboring states. On the other hand, I don't know why we wouldn't engage with the other benefits of some of the ag products that are out there and available, as I understand it.
Right, the industrial hemp side.
Yeah, and I don't see a downside there, but I'm not as close to it as many.
Sure.
But this will continue to rage, I think. But Idaho has kind of turned into that island that has taken a different path, and so far, well, we're the fastest growing state in the country, and I get feedback a lot of the reasons why. And this is one of the reasons why some people don't want to raise their families in those environments. So interesting topic, complicated topic,
sure.
But there's kind of a 30,000 foot response anyway.
I certainly appreciate that. It is a tough space to navigate, a complex space to navigate, and a pretty immature space to navigate with the respect to what's going on nationally. So again, I can't thank you enough for your perspective on that one. As we get close to closing out here, and just so folks know, like I think I agree with the congressman in some of these areas, but I hold a different view around the legalization in Idaho, and we're not arguing about it. It's really great. It's like I respect and decency, which kind of goes into the last question here, which is the importance of individual responsibility, kind of trust, morality, standing for something. And that's kind of one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk to you about, because you seem like, and I don't know you hardly at all, but a fairly principled individual. And I feel like what we're running into is a principles problem and a happiness problem in this country right now. We're in such an amazing country. But I think for some reason, I think we're able to allow ourselves to think that it's not a good country, or, there's a lot of infighting around all this stuff that's going on. So what can we do at an individual level, and how can we support you as a representative and support other representatives around the country with how to respectfully provide our perspectives? How do we get heard without screaming in the streets? Like what is that path, and how can we start healing?
There seems to be in our culture, to your point, I think you very appropriately bring it up, the change in attitude about American exceptionalism. I don't think there's anything wrong with identifying what I firmly believe to be true. America is special. Our people are special. Our history is special. Have we got dark phases of history? Yes, we do. Have we made mistakes? Yes, we have. I think it was Winston Churchill who once famously said, "You can always count on America to do the right thing once they've exhausted every other option." And there's probably truth to that. But there's never been a history in the world that has fought a war to end slavery, for example. memory serves, 800 plus thousand, and that may or may not be an accurate number, but that's what comes to mind. People died over that. But you know what? It was extremely costly. But we're the only nation that I know of that has ever gone through that. What nation in the world has literally bankrupted itself trying to save each other in the last 2 years, year and a half? America. We've spent more money on COVID. We've spent more money, resources, effort, energy on a pandemic than every other nation in the world combined. And that's because we have a value around life. And that's special. Now, you can argue from a practical standpoint, like China does, they don't put near the premium on human life that we do. But you know what? I don't want to be Chinese. I mean, that's a value system that I don't share. I do believe life is that important. If you can't stand up for life, if even though we disagree, if I don't stand for your right to have your life, and I don't support that and take the responsibility that you gave me as your representative to protect you, then what's it all for? Yeah. So we are special, and I think it's important that we should educate our kids. Look, America is not perfect. We've got lots of faults, but go around the world, which I've had the privilege of being able to do, and you go find another government, you go find another society, you go find another place that you would rather be in. Now, you'll always find some little niches here or there, a Denmark or a Sweden or a small, but then try to magnify that scale and then look at their overall culture. What's their overall tax burden? How much overall satisfaction do they get? For the most part, we have been blessed with a founding structure that more or less has told Jake and Russ, look, you go out and do what you're going to do, and you can, for the most part, determine your course. You can, for the most part, determine whether or not you succeed or you fail, or you drive a new car, or you don't have the money to buy a car at all. Now, there's more and more exceptions, I understand, but for the most part, we have those opportunities. So where does it come from? It comes from our founding framework. I personally believe strongly that there was a divine inspiration for the founders of this nation. I think that that they put together a structure, a framework of constitutional laws and guidelines and human rights that man in and of themselves don't have the capacity to set up. And we've been the beneficiary of that. The further we stray away from those guidelines, the bigger the problems that we have. And I don't say that in any arrogant way at all. I'm right at the top when it comes to falling on my face in a whole bunch of ways, but I respect that system and I do the best I can to try to protect it and promote it. And I love this state. I love this country, and I'm often not worthy of it. But we've lost the bravado, if you will. We're Americans, and that's a special thing. And we want to encourage our kids on that front. And it's okay to be special. We've taken that system and we've generated more prosperity than every other nation in the history of the world combined. And so I think those are all blessings that we need to take to heart. There's responsibilities that come with that. But now take all of that and quantify it around this. For the most part, we have engaged in a set of laws. We abide by the rule of law. You can't have a safe society without laws. You can't have a fruitful, prosperous society without laws. Without laws, there would be no reason that someone couldn't storm your house and take it over, and it'd be survival of the fittest. And that some countries are that way. But it's been taking that structure. applying it with a rule of law, and then agreeing, okay, Jake, these are the laws we're going to operate by. I don't have the right to come take your house. You don't have the right to take my life. And if either of those things happen, there's consequences. So it's understanding that we're a nation of laws, and by abiding by that. And for me, it's understanding that we were created in a special way. For me, there is a God, and that God had a hand in the creation of this nation and our structure. That's the premise that I think that sometimes is more and more getting swept under the rug, but it's the reality, and it's the truth, and it's a source of our blessings.
Wow. That's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. And I've just got maybe one or two little notes to put in there and themes that I'm calling out. I think one of the things that you touched on early on was like, it's harder for us to say that you're proud to be American, because for some reason folks have a negative intonation that means you're not respecting other countries, or that you're not okay with it. Like, America's the best and everyone else sucks. That's not, that's not the sentiment. I think the sentiment is like, hey, I'm proud to be American, and like, that's great. And then also like, be proud from where you're from too, and support your communities. And like, and I think it's just that mutual respect, because we're in such a polarizing time, that you're either one or the other. And I think that there's a perception that if you are saying that you're proud to be American, I think some people take that as nationalistic, where, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just being proud of where you're from and the opportunities you've been afforded. And sir, we are coming up on time. I know that you are an extremely busy man. I appreciate so much your perspective. I appreciate what you do for the state of Idaho. And I look forward to learning more and being a more responsible citizen in my civic duty to my community and to my state. And again, for a small podcast based out of Idaho here with a little bit of a national reach, I certainly appreciate you carving out time for me.
Well, you can do one more thing, and I mean this sincerely, and I say this a lot to people when I interact with them, and that's, don't be shy on providing counsel. Don't be shy on providing ideas and input. There is no monopoly on wisdom here. We have a delegation of 4 people total represented in Congress for our state. California, by comparison, is in the 40s, 47-ish, something like that, 49. We need the input of our citizenry. We need the accountability. And I'm speaking for myself, Jake. I don't worry a whole lot about elections, because if I get unhired, that's an upgrade in many ways. But as long as I'm here, I want to do the most responsible job that I can, most thoughtful job. I may make mistakes, but I never want it to be because I wasn't educated or I didn't have the options on the table. And that's where our citizenry comes in. So take your vantage point, take the lens you look through, and please share ideas, thoughts, counsel with me and with the rest of the delegation. We will all gain from it.
Again, sir, appreciate your time, and looking forward to following up with you. Thanks for spending time with me on the podcast today.
Pleasure.